The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Hello and welcome back to the show. We got a juicy topic today. When communities start boycotting the brands they love, what happened? How did they get here? I'm Steven Sakach here with Tullio Siragusa and Ash Maher. Hey, guys.
Hey, let's do this.
So for the most part, when we talk about consciousness in companies, we are talking about companies getting into trouble if they basically aren't loving. They did something awful to the environment, they discriminated, or they were awful to employees. But what if they're trying to be loving but see a major backlash as a result? This is what happened to Harley Davidson and its community recently. They have been getting hammered by conservatives in their community online and were kind of boycotted at Sturgis. As a result, Harley backed away from some things. Ash, take us through it.
Yeah, so with Harley Davidson, they decided that they were going to drop some of their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, also known as DEI. The company said it has stopped consulting the Human Rights Campaign's metric for treatment of LGBTQ plus employees, and that its sponsorship decisions will now be determined by the company and foundation, which will focus on retaining our loyal writing community. A quote from one of their upper level management: "We do not have a DEI function today." And Harley Davidson has not since April, according to the statement. So Harley Davidson also affirmed its rejection of hiring quotas and socially motivated content included in training. In the statement, the brand maintained support for first responders, active military members, and veterans. So this move came after an online campaign by a conservative posted a list of grievances against Harley Davidson in July, claiming they've gone totally woke. "We are saddened by the negativity on social media over the last few weeks, designed to divide the Harley Davidson community." So Steve, this is kind of silly. This is crazy. So this is an example of at one point, I believe that they were trying to be a part of the DEI community, trying to be as inclusive, I believe, to all people. And in doing so, they actually ended up hurting their core base. This is an example of they were actually trying to do what was right, and it totally backfired. So how does one navigate these waters?
Yeah, and really this isn't the first company, as we've seen, that's gotten into these situations. So the Harley Davidson, it follows Tractor Supply decision back in June to eliminate DEI roles, according to news reports. And Tractor Supply they also walked back support for LGBTQ community and commitment to carbon emission goals, I believe. And same sort of thing going on with like John Deere. And then, of course, we had the big Bud Light controversy a while back. So others have been kind of facing this backlash. So what is happening here is companies with a conservative base and a community are being targeted by conservatives. And there will be more. And I want to zoom out and talk about why this is happening from a consciousness standpoint and why brands with good intentions are finding a disconnect or outright revolt. Tullio, you're a motorcycle lover. Let's talk about the Harley brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a number of motorcycles throughout my life, from Japanese to Italian to German, and Harley Davidsons as well. And once I rode a Harley Davidson, I kind of never looked back. So I was definitely one of the people that loved the feeling, and something that they've been selling and marketing to for many years. The sense of freedom, individuality. That's their core identity. It's been built on this ideal of adventure and freedom. even a little bit of rebellion. Oddly enough, some people think the Harley riders are like the gang members, but most of the people I've met are CPAs, lawyers, guys and women who just need a little escape on the weekend from their day-to-day reality. So the brand has always embodied the spirit of the open road, the American dream. American dream has always been selling this idea of freedom. So they've embodied that, and ability for people to ride and express their individuality without constraints. This is why you'll see someone who might wear a suit all week, grow a goatee on the weekend and wear leather. It's like you almost get to play a different personality for a few hours. So over the decades, they've become iconic with this sort of counterculture, that's often associated with freedom, rebelliousness, nonconformism, and the brand appeals to those who see themselves as outsiders to a certain degree, right? Who want to break away from social norms. So the other thing is they've always encouraged community and brotherhood and sisterhood, and that's kind of been supported by their HOG, the Harley Owners Group, which is actually the largest motorcycle club in the world. So that unites riders from all walks of life who have a passion for the brand and for that kind of lifestyle, the weekend version of that lifestyle for many people. And so it's always pushed camaraderie and again, brotherhood, sisterhood, promoting a sense of community amongst the riders. And that camaraderie is often found at a lot of Harley Davidson events and gatherings, and it's part of the core of their brand, reinforcing this idea that you ride a Harley, it's more than just owning a motorcycle. You're being part of a larger community. And frankly, they actually have a very design thinking approach to how they brand themselves, because they're building community in a very tightly knit community. The other thing that they've always promoted is authenticity, authenticity and heritage, right? So they've always emphasized authenticity in their products, in their marketing, in the rider experience, which is why for me, when they introduced an electric version of their motorcycle, I was like, what are you guys doing with an electric version? Where's the sound and the vibration?
Yeah, Ash, when you think of a Harley rider, what do you think? Just seeing them go by, right?
I'm thinking a man's man. He's got the leather jacket on, gangster, but it's funny.
Not an electric scooter or anything, just
right.
But the funny thing is, every gathering I've ever gone to over the years is all a bunch of Wall Street accountants. It's the furthest from the rebel that you would think of, but they get to play that role for the weekend, and usually they have their spouses with them. It's kind of like a culture of just letting loose and letting free, with responsibility, of course. Not, that's always been the key thing. But their motorcycles are also awesome and different. I've had many different bikes, and it's just what I'm marketing to it. It's just a different experience. It's hard to describe it. It's very experiential, for sure. So it's kind of sad to have seen this whole thing take place for this brand.
So
but
let's
also
get
not
into
surprised. It's kind of the times that we're in right now. Everything gets
let's get into that. So I want to empathize and take on perspectives of both the Harley leadership and the Harley community, and talk about the consciousness at play here, because this is why there was a disconnect, and this is why there will be other protests in the future with other brands. So first off, let's kind of step back and realize, that the boycott of a product in the grand scheme of things is probably progress. This is a nonviolent protest, right? This is in other times, other places, you might see buildings burnt down or just, pitchforks coming out, basically. So, some of the Harley riders did want to, should I shoot up my bike or blow it up? There's kind of that kind of talk about anger. But in the terms of cultural evolution, exercising your rights of freedom of speech and freedom in the capitalist, marketplace, this is progress. from other alternatives, right? I mean, it's people exercising their freedom. So just stepping back, it's better than alternatives here. But what is happening from a consciousness perspective is that brand is something that brands and marketers need to pay attention to. I always say companies will find that safe place as consciousness evolves, right? The consciousness of companies evolve. And so how does consciousness evolve? Well, it usually evolves painfully, but essentially it's the ability to take on more perspectives over time. So in other words, to be more and more empathetic. And just because someone has the ability to take on more perspectives, that doesn't mean they're better than someone else. You could still be meaner than someone else just because you just have more perspectives. It just doesn't qualify you automatically as something greater than someone else. So just keep that in mind. But consciousness evolves, right? So I like to say, think about it in the way of how you learn math. So you start out learning your numbers, and then you learn addition, subtraction, and then you learn multiplication, division, algebra, geometry, calculus. It's that there's a whole progression right here. So in consciousness, someone is always more progressive than someone else along the journey, right? So even conservatives in this country could be seen as more progressive than conservatives in other parts of the world, right? So again, none of this means anyone is better or more deserving of anything than anyone else. You very well could have high consciousness and be a jerk because of some issues. So just keep that in mind. But if we were to describe the Harley community consciousness, it falls into a couple main areas, which is traditional and modern stages of consciousness. So traditional has a lot of that patriotism, the brotherhood, the tradition, the rituals, sometimes very black and white moral codes, right? That's kind of the traditional conscious base. Modern stage of consciousness has that individualism, that pursuit of adventure, the self-reliance. It's very much about the individual. And so there's a lot of good in both of these when healthy, and a lot of toxicity when unhealthy, right? So the reason consciousness evolves from these stages is because of that toxicity, the unhealthy parts. People are basically saying, there's got to be a better way than this, right? This was better at some point, but now it's still not working out for me. We still got loose ends. So the next stage of consciousness that comes online is postmodernism. So if we go from modern to postmodern, and here you have more pluralism, more talk of diversity, more seeing from other perspectives. And while there are things that the modern consciousness did that moved us to more equality, it was really only equality for some, or that it wasn't totally worked out, right? So postmodern consciousness, it's pushing us forward to more encompassing perspectives. So you kind of see this movement maybe in the 60s and things like that, things moving really fast. We see it now. So this is a quick explanation and there's a lot of generalities in there, but we're seeing here in the Harley Davidson situation a clash that I think is largely from that traditional consciousness with a postmodern consciousness that some of their leaders have. So what Harley started verbalizing in their leadership was really this triple bottom line approach to capitalism, which we've talked about, which is meaning the leadership wanted to focus on people, planet, and profits. It should be a good thing. As part of that, they had various diversity trainings and sponsorships of LGBTQ events, environmental work as well. Their heart here was to make a more loving, empathetic company and company culture. Where the empathy had a disconnect was with its large conservative base. And once online conservatives targeted them, all these Harley activities just kind of push buttons for them, right? So let's first give a little respect just to the Harley for trying to be more loving. I think this is, the intent here. And sometimes we forget to look at the intent of things before we start bringing out the pitchforks. But now let's give some grace to both sides here. And giving grace is a very difficult thing for postmodern consciousness to do. It's difficult because people have, their patience with the unhealthy parts of conservatism have worn thin. There's racism, sexism, misogyny. It's like they're done with the hate. All right. It's completely understandable. So if you're conservative, this is why they are angry. This is where they can also go unhealthy too and turn mean in a way. So give them a little grace for that, but they also need to give conservatives a little bit of grace as well. So Tullio, we were talking about this earlier in the week. Walk us through kind of why the Harley community is tired and irritated a little bit themselves, at least the portion that's fired up by this particular incident. Let's try and look through their eyes.
Yeah, I think it's also a very telling story of what's going on in society in general as well.
Absolutely.
For a long time, certain groups felt held back. So now they're out there basically evangelizing. And there's some groups are like, I don't need you to evangelize that to me. You live your life the way you want to live your life. I live my life the way I want to live my life. That's part of being free. And so I think from their perspective, it's like, why is this being pushed on us? This is not, we don't have, and the problem is there's a few, right? There's always those few who have all those traits that we mentioned. And then there's the assumption that the entire base is that way. Right? Just the same, and it works both ways, right? You've got conservative who think everybody's, quote unquote woke when they might be just a few, and then you have the liberals who will see a few conservatives who are fundamentalists and think they're all fundamentalists, right? So that's part of the challenge, is that those groups that have felt held down are coming out and voicing their freedom. And the groups that have not been held out, it's hard for them to acknowledge, like, why is this being pushed on me? I just want to live my life. I'm happy with the way it is. Stop pushing this agenda on me. You got what you wanted. You're happy. Move on, right? So people are tired. They're a little tired because part of it is understandable. Like, why are you pushing this on me? I don't have this kind of problem with anyone. But part of it is also a lack of understanding of the fact that this is necessary for this other group to just be heard, So there's lack of empathy that goes on both sides a little bit, right? You've got lack of empathy for those who don't want to be pushed into hearing something over and over that they've chosen otherwise. So it's their way of saying, this is the way I choose to live my life. Choose to live your life the way you want to, but don't push your way on me. That's exhausting. I don't want to deal with that and irritating. And there's also the other side of like, well, but I need you to hear me, right? You don't have to change the way you do things. You just need to hear me. Can you just respect that I have a voice and I want to be heard? So there's empathy on both sides that can be shown. That's really what grace is to be able to say, I understand the need for this to happen and it doesn't affect me because I choose otherwise. I don't have to let it upset me. So there's a little bit of consciousness growth that's needed, I think, on both sides. One, to recognize, to respect that certain people have made their choices. You don't have to push your ways to them, and so on.
Let me add to
Harley's
that.
A chasm.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Tullio. There's a little bit of consciousness growth on both sides. And I just want to add, like, for postmodernism, it's really hard for them to see where the growth is. And it is that grace part. And if you watched if anyone watched the DNC with there's like Obama's speech and some others, he talked about grace quite a bit there. And it was really, let's be better neighbors. And this is what it means, is really, that's where that postmodern, where you evolve from beyond this is you're so tired and your patience is worn so thin. But it's like the next step up is to, how can I have grace when dealing with this? And it's very, very difficult. But I just wanted to underline that point, Tullio. You can, if you have more to say, please continue on.
It's like this. The way I see it is like this. Sometimes someone just needs you to hold a bucket for them, and they just need to throw up in the bucket. Right? Being loving is just holding the bucket sometimes, right? Or you could say, I go throw up somewhere else. Right? You have the freedom to do either one, right? Which is kind of how the base response is, like, go throw up somewhere else, right? Or they can say, okay, let me hold a bucket, get it all out. Not going to change the way I am, but if you need me to hold a bucket, that's my loving thing to do, is to hold a bucket. And I'm using that as an example just to highlight that sometimes empathy is just letting people vent and express themselves and go through those experiences because they need to. They're working through their own stuff in doing that. It's like children. They don't know how to respond to emotions and situations. What do? They cry, they stomp their feet, they yell until they figure out how to deal with those emotions and develop the intelligence to deal with certain emotions. That's how they react. So consciously, society can have a similar effect to things because they don't know how to respond or deal with certain things. And so they're just like, stomp their feet, like children. But part of maturing is realizing sometimes someone just wants you to hold a bucket for them, hold the bucket for a few minutes, and then let them have peace, right? So there's definitely opportunity in these scenarios to rise above.
And there's commonalities too, and we'll get to some of that. Like, what can we commonly share? But just going back to that traditional consciousness, just to empathize a little bit, they don't want to be dominated by postmodern views. This is a threat to them, and it's a threat to their traditions and their sense of purpose. So when things are changing fast for them, they're just like, they're no longer comfortable in the world that they were used to, and so it's just a threat, and it threatens their way of life. So you're going to get some pushback on it. But bringing this back to business, if you're a business consultant trying to help modernize corporations, you really need to make sure you're doing it in a way that can align with the community at that business. So Ash, you've got a conservative base and progressive leadership. This is like the Thanksgiving dinner with all the relatives coming over together, right? And what could go wrong? What could go wrong here with this?
It's funny you bring that up. I don't think I've had a Thanksgiving dinner with all the relatives since 2020, 2021, when things got super polarizing. And ever since then, not a single one. I think when you have such polarizing views, I'm talking about one demographic actually believes that unless you believe in what they believe, you believe that you want the world to end, right? You don't care about the planet. You don't care about this. You don't care about that. And then you have the other side who thinks you're literally convoluting our children and our entire generation. So you have to have these very, very polarizing beliefs where they actually believe one side's hurting the other side. And then you're supposed to come together and try to have a amicable conversation.
And both sides are talking down to each other. They're not talking horizontally.
There's not a moment where someone says, I can see it from that perspective. No, it's like, you're an idiot, you're a monster, right? It's like it's one or the other. Like,
you're complicit, if you don't have a choice, you're complicit.
Yeah, you're complicit. Yeah,
you're a situation for corporate leadership.
You're the one person.
You can't be neutral on this.
Right. You have to imagine you're the one person at the dinner table saying, hey, doesn't everyone know the cardinal rule, no politics in the dinner table? Shut up. You have to imagine it.
Yeah, so this is like a great position for corporate leadership to be in with the community. It's like, hey, this is not working. You guys are going to have to come at it a little differently, and really both sides are, but especially the leadership there, because this is the base. But so Ash, in marketing, what kind of audience data are we typically dealing with? It's not like we don't have this consciousness level to choose from and this consciousness level.
No, you're talking about psychographics, the demographic in the individual. What are they into? What do they listen to? What news networks do they watch? What you're talking about, this entire persona of an individual that typically will then relate to that brand based on their persona and their experiences of life. I think as marketers, I think this is the one area where we can leverage stereotypes or leverage elements of understanding that a market or an audience wants a way to be communicated or is requesting a way to be communicated with, or they're used to a certain way of communication. And in order to resonate with them, you have to meet them at where they're at. Now, if you're trying to bring in a concept that doesn't relate to them, especially things that can be polarizing political view, if you're talking about progressive leadership, trying to bring progressive agendas to an audience that's conservative, right? That's just a mismatch in target audience. That's just bad marketing. You would be a bad marketer if your customer persona went from, this is who my audience is in the Harley Davidson, they're conservative, they are white collar, hardworking individuals. They want that freedom. They want to be able to take the open road. They have certain political views and so on and so forth. If you try to then convolute that persona with what we think is right, well, now you're just polluting your customer persona, right? That's just what's happening.
That's a good point. So from that marketing concept, there's just this major disconnect there. If you're thinking one thing and they're thinking another, and we're trying to, as marketers, we're trying to triangulate when we build audiences. Like, okay, what's our audience interests? Where are they in their different walks of life and things like that? And you're trying to triangulate exactly who they are with all these different, like you said, demographics, psychographics, all those things. There's no easy consciousness stage though for, this is exactly the stage of consciousness I'm at.
But even if, forget consciousness, just basic marketing, you serve the need. You serve a need, right? You market to a need. So now you understand your base and you go and market to them something that they don't need. Not only they don't need, they reject.
Yeah.
That's like, why would you do that? It's just basic one-on-one marketing. Like, serve the need.
Let's piggyback on that for a second. Let's take In-N-Out Burger. Imagine they decide that they're going to launch an initiative where they're all going to be advertising salads for the next 30 to 60 days. Can you only imagine how detrimental that would be to their brand, right? And one could argue, well, they're trying to make sure America is a safer place or a healthier place. We have an obesity epidemic. There's all these issues we're trying to solve. That would be detrimental. It would come from a good place. Hey, we're just trying to make America healthier. So let's start marketing salads.
That's been done too. McDonald's tried that. Wait, like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Let's just make the burger a little better and get back to selling burger. Like they try that too. It's like, you got to know your base. You can't change your base way of living.
Yeah.
That's not your job as a company, as a marketer,
So does this mean, though, you can't have progressive leadership and a conservative community? And I think the answer is no. You can have that, but it just means you're going to have to be much more artful in how you proceed, and you have to find common areas that you both love, and see eye to eye on, and focus on, and start there. This is where grace can start.
Can we take a second? I want to just on that point. That's such an important point you just made, because I think I want to make sure the audience doesn't think that we're saying, hey, just become black and white, remove any diversity or inclusion from your mind. No, we're not saying that, because I think even in the Harley Davidson community, I'm sure there are progressives in that community. Now the question, or what Steve, you just brought up, is figuring out what is the common beliefs that they share and maybe focusing on those things.
The healthy common belief. Yeah. Like if there's a healthy one, absolutely don't indulge the unhealthy.
Yeah. But
imagine an advertising where it shows that, hey, a progressive and a conservative could share in the common love for the brand. Maybe speaking to the fact that, no, we understand there are differences, but hey, here are the commonalities. And then showing these two individuals shaking hands and putting aside their difference. That would be a great ad campaign that shows that, hey, we're aware that we have a base. We also are aware that in that base there are individuals that are possibly being isolated. Maybe they are LGBTQ, but they also follow the same type of values that the conservative base has. How do we share that with our audience to share, hey, no, there are common beliefs here, but these are our values, right? So if you're LGBTQ, these are our values. If you align with these specific values, there's a little bit of an overlap there. This is where we meet common ground. This is why we both could love the Harley Davidson. We don't want to say that, oh, because you're a progressive, you're not a Harley Davidson person. They completely missed the mark. I think what they were trying to do was, hey, we want to show that we have this conservative base, but other individuals that might have different beliefs could still align with some of our values. How do we incorporate them? They missed the mark, right? They missed it a little bit by going too far. But then I think that if you could find the common ground.
But also I think there's a little bit more to it, Ash. it used to be, regardless of what your beliefs were, you had a certain decorum of professionalism as an executive or as a leader as a company, right? You kept that stuff at home, right? Your belief, your way of living had nothing to do with the way you ran the company. In fact, there was a wall between those things, right? And there's a little bit of lack of that going on too, where now, when did it become okay for a CEO or an executive to go push their way of being on their clients or their customers?
Absolutely.
Keep professional, know your base. And if, by the way, if you're going into a leadership role in a company that doesn't represent your values, maybe if it's so important to you to do that, maybe you shouldn't go in that company, right? Because you're not going to go in there and succeed to change an entire culture around you. Nor should you even try to do that, because it'll backfire. But that's where I think there's a lack of professionalism that happens sometimes, because I should be able to walk in regardless of what my beliefs is and run the business in a way that serves the needs of my customers.
Yes.
I think, Tullio, let me also give a little pushback from the Harley perspective. Like, I walk into the company and I want a triple bottom line approach. I want to, people, planet, profit. I want to focus on those three things. So that's, that's not necessarily being crazy agenda coming in here. But I think where the problem went with them is you have to treat the brand as a person. If the brand were personified, like, how would it speak to these issues, right? How would Harley, with Harley language, how would it address people and planet and profit? You can't take the same playbook that worked over at some progressive company and dump it into the Harley culture, because like we talked about earlier, there's just major disconnect there. And I think that's, Tullio, probably the point where, that playbook and those politics in that playbook, where you're bringing that into to the battle here, is just that's a bad battle plan for trying to go.
Try the ointment first before you go in with the surgical procedure.
Yeah. So I think they missed the boat on, hey, we want to do people focus, we want to do planet focus, and of course, profit focus, like we always do. But they missed the question of, well, if Harley were doing this, the Harley language, how would it take on this challenge? And it would be very different than the steps that they took, those are the steps I think that really got them in trouble.
Yeah, they totally could have succeeded at this, even within their brand's core values. They absolutely could have. They could have spoken about the individuality, the need for independence. They could have spoken about, just from the perspective of even the planet. They could have spoken about the beauty of the open road and how we appreciate that and how we want to keep more open roads. I mean, there could have been so many things that would have appealed within the language of the base that could have achieved the same goal without going at it like, in your face. That's where I think they went wrong.
Like a Harley rider, I'm just picturing, you mentioned the open road, just kind of going down this road and beautiful, and then suddenly just seeing some trash or something there and just kind of pulling over and just like, now come on, you're messing up my ride. You're bumming my vibe here. So there's ways you could probably speak to it. And I think let's do that a little bit. We're a marketing agency. If Harley wants to push back a little on their community,
call us, Harley. We'll solve this for you.
I mean, I would say focus on being the rebel. I'd focus on that side.
Right. Yeah.
Focus on, you can kind of put aside differences, like, and unite around kind of being rebels in a way. I could see that. And maybe don't take the big leap of what they were doing, which was trying to get basically the traditional consciousness base to go all the way to postmodern consciousness. Yeah. Take them from traditional consciousness to modern consciousness. Just move it slightly, just where the push is a little bit smaller. So here, as an example, I thought of this for just a few minutes. if we want to make that slight push to modern, where can we find that common ground? And so how about an idea of, I just want to ride. And so here's my quick attempt at a story that tries to do that. So, and makes this move from traditional to modern consciousness with a little bit of a theme in there. So picture this older model car, and this is about 40 years ago, and it's on the side of the road, and you have a woman who happens to be black trying to fix her tire, and the jack is broken, and she has her child in the car kind of looking out the back window there, and this guy on a Harley pulls up. He looks a little rough, you know. She explains the problem, and then some other Harley riders pull up. They could look a little scary, maybe. There's a lot of, you know, the motorcycle club comes up here, MC pulls over, and suddenly you see them lifting the car, and the kid in the car kind of goes up with it as they lift up the car, and then she changes the tire out. And then the kid looks in awe as the guys kind of ride off. And you flash forward now, like 40 years from now, and he's getting a Harley for himself. And you see him meet up with some very similar looking riders to what he saw when he was little, but now he's, you know, a black man in age, you know, 45, 46 or something. And someone asks, where are we going? And he says, I just want to ride. And they get out on the road. And so with this kind of concept, you kind of have some diversity in the mix, but you don't make a big deal about it. And let's just ride. You bridge that traditional and modern consciousness with just, let's just ride and kind of just forget about this other stuff. And you could build that let's just ride concept out over the years as, you know, maybe your base evolves a little bit more. And you could show a little more diversity if you want. But we get the kindness in there, we get the empathy in there. And really no one, if you get angry about that kind of commercial, it's kind of, you look like a jerk. So I don't think you're going to get much pushback from it. But that would be just an example of kind of a smaller move from traditional to modern consciousness that wouldn't, you know, rock the boat too much, not too heavy-handed at all, and helps you achieve kind of telling this story from just a slightly different perspective. And you find that commonality of let's just ride. Yeah. And you get back to what Harley's about.
So many different scenarios. I like the idea, let's just ride, bunch of riding down a road, and they land somewhere, it's just dirty, and a bunch of people get together and clean up a beach, for example, you know, because part of conserving the planet and conserving the quality of life is having things clean, right? So it could be very subtle about.
Yeah, you don't want to be
got together to clean up, you know.
You don't want to be over the top pandering to
right. That's the whole thing. And not every commercial wouldn't have to be this way. You know, do a few here and there, and then you do traditional stuff. But it could have achieved the purpose of actually enhancing the brand as a very inclusive brand who cares about conserving the individuality of people and the freedom of people, because that speaks to all walks of life, right? Everybody wants that. So they could have actually leveraged their heritage towards something really positive, but you know, they went, and that's, I think, where the base got upset. It's like, why pushing this agenda all of a sudden on us instead of just, you know, highlighting the beauty that already exists in this community? We do all this stuff already. Why not highlight it and do it in a way that's more, you know, aligned with who we are, right? So it was almost offensive to a lot of people to be like, we do that stuff. A lot of the gatherings that these groups do, they clean up, they do all kinds of volunteering, charity work, you name it, right? So there's a lot of good that was already being done, but it wasn't highlighted in a way that satisfied them.
Find the kindness that you share. Find the kindness that you share in there and focus on that. And so that everyone is seen in that way, and no one's feeling like a jerk or something. Find that and work off that. So, you know, and I think right now, if you have a conservative audience in your business, you are going to be targeted by people who want to stop you doing certain things. That's just facts on the ground right now. They're looking for the next company to go after. And also, I mean, if you're a progressive business with a progressive audience, you're also going to be targeted for not upholding those values. So, and they will go look at your supply chain too. Why are you working with this company that did, this awful thing? And they'll call you out on that. So you're going to have to really focus on the values of your communities, whatever level you're at. So this is the challenge for leaders and marketers. Be empathetic to your group, your community. Be authentic to your brand. Find ways to have grace. Communities, have grace with your company leaders. Be humble, be loving. Their heart may be in the right place. Company leaders, have grace with your community. Focus on building love where you have that common ground. No one is talking about this the way we are right now, I don't think. Our intention is really to try to help you look through this through a consciousness and an empathetic lens. I hope you found some value in this conversation. That's it for today's episode. We will see you on the next Bliss Business Podcast.